Hi, I'm Lisa, Project Manager at Blackbit Digital Commerce, and I'd like to welcome you to our new video series. Since we know from experience that video tutorials explain even complicated issues more easily than comprehensive manuals, we started this channel. In our videos, we would like to show you the possibilities arising from the data director's various configuration options. Watch our very first video tutorial to learn how objects for manufacturers, categories and products are created and filled from a CSV file. It will also be shown how manufacturer-product relations can be imported and how the products can be created below the respective main category of the category tree. Have fun!
On the first session about the Pimcore Data Director bundle, we want to cover an import of some e-commerce data. And for that I have set up a little demo system where I have installed the core shop. This will work as our data model. So we have all the core shop classes here. And we have a CSV file which we want to import into Pimcore objects. And this CSV file looks like that. We have a product number, a product name, a manufacturer, main category, and a main image. So this is some kind of classical e-commerce import. These first two fields are scalar fields. So this will be an input field in Pimcore. This will also be an input field. Manufacturer will either be a manufacturer object with the name, which is in this column, and on the other side, on the products object, this will be a relation, a many-to-one relation to the manufacturer object. For the category, this is also a relation. This will become a many-to-many relation on the product object. And the image gets assigned also in this case to a many-to-many relation, but could also be assigned to an image field or image gallery, whatever your data model is designed. I've set up a little task so that we can see what we plan today. We want to import the data from the product CSV, which we just saw, into Pimcore. And our goal is to get, at the end, when we're finished, we want to set up this object tree. And on the first level, there are the folders manufacturers and products. So these are simple folders. And on the second level, below manufacturers, there should be the manufacturer objects with these keys, Lime and Jumpy. And they should be of the class core shop manufacturer. And below the products folder, directly below that folder, there should be the categories or the main categories of the products. In this case, dragging bikes and dirt bikes. These should be of the class core shop category. And below those, there should be the actual products of the class core shop product. We want to implement or we want to fill for the classes, we want to fill those fields. For the core shop manufacturer class, we want to fill the manufacturer column of our CSV file, this one, and put these contents to in the created manufacturer objects in the field name. So when we look at the core shop manufacturer class in Pimcore, there are two fields, name and image, and for this example, we only want to fill the name field. Yes, then look back to there. For the core shop category, we want to fill the content of the main category column in our CSV file, so that's this one, and enter those category names to the field name in the language English. So when we look at the core shop category class, there are some more fields. For this example, it's enough to fill the name. but this is a localized field. In our installation, we have only set up English language, but there, of course, could be multiple languages. But for this example, it's enough to fill the English field. And on the last class, which is the kosher product, we want to fill the product number from our CSV to the SKU field, product name to the English name. The manufacturer field should go into the manufacturer relation. Let's have a look at that. Kosher product has even more fields. SKU is a simple input. The name is a localized field. It's the product name. The manufacturer is a many-to-one relation. So at first we will create the manufacturer object, and later on in the product import we will assign this manufacturer object to the product. And the main category should go to the categories field. That's this one. That's a many-to-many relation. And the last field will be the main image shall go to the images relation. In this case, it's also a many-to-many relation, but with assets allowed. While categories, of course, is for objects. Okay, so the first task is to import the manufacturers. For that, we can open the data director bundle on the settings menu and open that. We create a manufacturers import. Just give it a name. And now we have to set up this import. The first important field is the source data type. The data director bundle can handle multiple data types, but as we in this example have a CSV file, we have to select CSV here. As you saw, when we select the source data type, the fields in the below area change depending on the selected source data type. The next important field is the import class. For the manufacturer's import, we want to import manufacturer objects, so we have to select the class here. The dropdown is populated by all the created Pimcore classes, yes, all the data object classes, as well as some core classes like assets, document, and export is another feature, which will come back later on. But for now, we want to import the kosher manufacturer class. As the CSV resource, this is the file in this case where we get the data from. But you can either enter a file or a folder or a URL or even a curl command from which you want to get the data from. In our case, I just imported the CSV to the assets area, so we can just assign that by drag and drop. But it's also possible to have these files as a file system folder. So you could also, when you, for example, would have your files under var import whatever product CSV, this would also be possible. Of course, not in this case because the file isn't in this on this place. But if you would have the file on this folder, then it would also work with file system folders. But for now, we will use this already existing asset as an import source. The next checkbox is not important for now. We'll come to that later on to run imports automatically. Then there's the target folder. This is the folder where new created objects should go to. When we look at the task, we want to put new manufacturers to the manufacturers folder. So when we enter here, manufacturers, and then the new objects will go into this folder. We could either create that folder beforehand manually, or when it doesn't exist, then the data director will create it on the fly as soon as the first object gets imported to that folder. Asset source and asset target folders do not matter for this manufacturer's import, but we will come back to that when we come to the products import, because our CSV file has some images, but these are only the product images, not the manufacturer images. Now we come to CSV specific settings. When we look at our CSV, then we see that in the first line there is the column headings. If you have such a CSV file, you have to check this checkbox that in the first row there are the field names. Otherwise, the first row would be interpreted as a data row, which is not the desired behavior in this case. Separator and text delimiter can be kept as the default values. When we open this CSV file with an editor, we see that we have used the semicolon as the field separator and the quote sign as the text delimiter, so we can leave that as is. And now we have to define the raw data columns. For that, you have to know that the import to Pimcore Data Objects with the data director does always happen in two steps. At the first steps, we extract the data which we need for our import from the import resource, so in this case from the CSV file, and put that data into an intermediate table. And in the second step, we use that intermediate table to import the data to the actual Pimcore data objects. This had the advantage is that we have a unified process for all different source data types. At first, from all the different source data types, the data is written to this intermediate table, and afterwards we have only one source of data which can be processed to get the data into these data objects. So when we look at the CSV file for the manufacturer objects, we only need the manufacturer's column. So in this case, we can add a new raw data field, enter manufacturer. So when you wonder what these fields are about, the field name, this is the name of the field with how we want to access the raw data field in the next object import step. And the second field is how the field is called in the import resource. So this one has to match with this, and the first one we can call it whatever we want, but for now it's easier to have the same name for both fields. When we save that, we will see a little preview in the example data column. This example is generated from our import resource, from the product CSV file, and from the first data set in this CSV file. In this case, it's this one, and so we can be sure that we haven't misspelled anything. Okay, now to execute the first step, to import the raw data from the import resource to this intermediate table, we can go to the History and Manual Import panel and start the raw data import. When we do that, a new row gets added to this table, and we see that on the current time there have been imported 2 items, which of course is what we expected. When we look at the preview panel, then we will see that this is exactly what we had in our CSV file, we extracted the column manufacturer and imported that to this intermediate table. Now for the second step, we want to map the field, the raw data fields, to the fields of the target class, in this case core shop manufacturer. For this task, we have to go to the attribute mapping panel, and there we see a grid with some fields on the left side, and these fields get listed automatically based on the set target class. So when we go back to the manufacturer class, we see that this class has two fields, name and image, and we will see that these fields also appear in the attribute mapping. That's the name field and that's the image field. Additionally, there are some more fields which are the system fields of Pimcore objects. These are the ID, the key, the path, and the published field. We have to say that the ID is a read-only field, so as this is an auto-increment field in the database, we do not want to set this manually. But all the other fields are just important. For example, the key field is what you see in the tree. So I'll show it on the assets tree because data objects is currently empty. For this asset, the key is the product CSV. The path is the parent element, so to say. And then you can say, should this object be published or not? And that's it for now. Below the class fields, there are some other special fields: result callback function, result document action. We'll come back to that in another session. These are to process the data which we got from the import and do something with this data. So we can create a pipeline, for example, and know what happened during the import. Okay, but for now we only want to create new imports, and as our task says, we want to import the manufacturer to the field name. So we go to the name and just assign the raw data field manufacturer, and then automatically the example result gets filled. Yes. For imports which are executed multiple times, it's important that the import, or let's just start an import. To start an import, we have two options. On the one hand, we can press this Start Pim Import button. This will import the raw data which we imported to the intermediate table, so this one, and import that to the actual Pimcore Data Objects. And another option is, especially when you set up the import, this is a good option, is this little green icon, so that you import only one raw data item. When you imagine that the import file has 10,000 of items, it wouldn't be a good idea to always have to start the complete import only to test if your attribute mapping is correct. For this reason, when you set up the import, you can just start the import for one raw data item. So let's just click that item, and then we see this output. This output at first seems a little verbose, but I'll explain what is seen here. At first, I'd have to say that from the data director, only the logs which have the app channel are important. All the PHP stuff is for PHP errors, which, for example, can happen if there is a bug in Pimcore or in the data director bundle itself. In this case, there are a lot of deprecation errors, and this the reason for that is that Pimcore supports Symfony 3 and 4, and so there will always be those deprecation errors, but you can turn that off in your PHP ini, but it doesn't matter for now. We only concentrate on the app logs. So let's get through them. On the first line, we see that the raw item 14 got imported. We see that in the background, this is an item 14, and we clicked that item. Then it is tried to find an existing item with the existing object of the class manufacturer, core shop manufacturer, with the name being jumpy. In this case, no items found, of course, because we haven't any objects currently. So the import bundle decides to import that object. It fills the field and queues the object for saving. Then there are some more deprecation errors, which is all again not caused by the data director bundle, but from Symfony, so the underlying libraries. And at the end, we save the object, and that's it. That's what we wanted to say. And when we refresh, then we see the manufacturer's folder got automatically created. And below that, we have this jumpy object, and its name is set on the object. When we look at the tree, we see that this object is striked through. That's because it's unpublished currently. So normal behavior for creating new objects is that they are created unpublished. But you always have to say that you want, or to set that you want the objects to be published. As we do not have the published state in our raw data or in our CSV file, we have to find another way to tell the import bundle to publish the objects. And for that, we have this little settings icon. When we press that, we can set some settings. I will just concentrate on this template dropdown for now, because this, or the other way around, you will have to edit the raw data from the intermediate table before it gets imported to the Pimcore objects. You can write a little PHP function below here, but we tried to make it as easy as possible, and for this reason we provide templates for the most use cases. There are some templates. So for this published field, there are the templates publish all or unpublish all, and when we click that, the callback function gets automatically filled, so you do not have to look up in the documentation how you can achieve that you want to publish all imported objects. Now in this case, this callback function is rather simple, only returns true, but in other cases it gets more complex. So when we save that, we see that the preview gets updated, and when we import that again, or let's come back to the other fields which we can set here on the settings. When we go, for example, to the name field again, then we have this checkbox for key attribute. A key attribute is used to find already existing objects. When we haven't set any key attribute, which is the case at the moment, then all the mapped fields will get used as key fields. So in this case, it doesn't matter because we only have one mapped field or two mapped fields, the manufacturer and the published icon. So this would still work, but it's always better to define a certain key field, which later on gets applied as to find to find existing objects. I said that it would work in this case, but as I see now, it wouldn't, because currently there's no object which has the manufacturer name Jumpy and is published, because currently we only have one object which isn't published. In this case, when we execute our import again, it will create another object. You see that here. And it would create another object, but this cannot be saved because there would be a key collision in this case. So we have to set a key field for this import. When we check that checkbox, that means that we want to find a manufacturer object which has in the name field the value of the manufacturer raw data column or raw data field. And when we now execute the import again, then we will see that the import found the object again, and it gets queued again for saving, successfully saved. When we refresh that, then we see that there isn't any additional object, but this one gets updated. So now it's published, and that's what we wanted to do. Yes. Now we come back to the other option to execute the import, because now we are safe that the import is working, as we imported this one raw data item. So we can start the import for all items. As I already said, this can be done with the second button, Start Pim Import. It is meant that this will import the data from the intermediate table, which you can access in the Preview tab, to the actual Pimcore objects. So when we press that, there is a question to skip already imported raw data items. I'll tell more about that in a minute or in the later session. So we import that, then a new row gets added to the status panel, and now we see that for the Pim import, 2 of 2 items got imported. And when we refresh the manufacturers folder, then we will see that the Lime object is also created with the name Lime in this name field. So the first task is solved. We have the manufacturers folder and the manufacturer objects. So let's proceed with the products folder. In this case, I will create the products folder manually so that I can show that this also will work with existing folders. Now we create another data port, but let's go back to the task. And on the first level, under the products folder, we want the main categories of the products. So before importing the products, we will set up an import for the categories. Again, press the Add Data Port button. We create a data port for importing categories. Again, the settings are nearly the same. CSV, import class, this time will be COSHAP category. The input source will be product CSV. And the target folder, now we can assign this target folder via drag and drop because we created it beforehand. Assets are again not interesting for this import because, as I said, our CSV file has only product images, not category images. The first row is again in the first row are the column headings, and as before. Now I want to go to another option. You can add those raw data fields as I described in the manufacturer's import. You can add them manually, but there's also this auto create button. And when you press that, the data director will read in the set import resource, in this case the product CSV file, and depending on the settings you set, it will read or it will automatically generate the raw data fields from the CSV file. In this case, it's only those 5 fields, but when you imagine you have a CSV file with 50 columns, for example, then it would be rather tedious to copy and paste all those fields just to create those raw data columns. So that's why you can automate this process with just one click and auto create those columns. While this seems easy for CSV files, this also works for the other source data types. So when you have, for example, an XML file with its multidimensional structure, this would also create these selectors, in this case XPath selectors, for those multidimensional structure, which even more helps because you haven't to read how XPath works or how, in the JSON example, how the JSON selectors work. But let's stay at the CSV for this task, for this example. And in our task, we want to import only, for the core shop category class, we only want to import data from the main category field of our CSV file to the English name field in Pimcore. So we can just remove all the fields we do not need for this import, just delete them, and the main category is kept. Now we save again and look at the example data. We see that tracking bikes gets output, and this makes us pretty sure that the input will work. So let's go directly to attribute mapping for now. In this case, the list of fields is a bit longer. That's because the core shop category class has some more fields. So all those fields which are in the category class are also listed in the attribute mapping. Again, those first fields are the system fields, and afterwards there are the data class fields. And on the end, there are those special fields, which we'll come back to in another session. For the category, our task says that we want to set the main category to the English name. So we go to the English name and just select the main category raw data field. Immediately, we see that the example data is listed here as we said before, we can publish that, but it isn't necessary, but only looks nicer for this example. Yes, as the object key, we also set main category, because in our example above, the tracking bikes should be the key. So name and key are identically in this case. Of course, is not necessary in every use case. That's it for the mapping. And now I come to the third button. This Start Complete Import button does the same as importing raw data and afterwards doing this PIM import or object import. So that's just a shortcut for those two steps being executed one after another. So when we press that, there are two new items, the raw data import and the PIM import. And when we refresh the tree, then we will see that the core shop category objects just got created. As we wanted it to have the name in the English field, this is done as we wanted. So the main category field contains dragging bikes and dirt bikes. So for dirt bikes, the key is set and the English name. Yes, so this fulfilled our tree till here. And now comes the tricky part. Now we want to import the product, and for that we create another data port. Again, we have CSV as source data type. We want to import core shop product objects. The CSV resource is again the already existing asset file. But now there's the difference. As target folder, we cannot set a fixed value because our target, where the object should go to, is dynamically now. The lime rental bike should get to or below dragging bikes, and the dirt flyer bike should go below dirt bikes. So we can't set any static target folder here, but we have to do that dynamically. And we will do that in the attribute mapping in a minute. But for now, we can leave that as is. The target folder can stay. For the asset source folder and asset target folder, we have to set values, especially for the asset source folder, because our images, I just imported these as Pimcore assets already, so we can just set the images folder to be our asset source folder. When we look at the CSV file again, we see that in the main image column, there's only the file name. For this reason, we have to specify where the data director importer can find those images. And in this case, it's the images folder. Again, like for the import resources above here, this can also be a file system folder. It does not need to be a Pimcore asset folder, it can also be a file system folder. Again, we have our fields in the first row, our column headings in the first row of the CSV file, and we auto create the fields. And this products import, we need all those fields and save them, and just see that the example data is listed. For now, we will import the raw data in a separate step to see that everything worked up. Here we see that the same data which we got extracted from our CSV file, and we can now use that data to map those fields to our products class. When we go to the attribute mapping, there are even more fields, of course, because the core shop product class has more fields. As our task wanted, we should set the column product number from the CSV file to the SKU field. So the SKU field in this case is an input field, and we see it here. If we wouldn't have found it, we can also search for it. But for now, we just found it. We set the SKU to the product number and are done with that step. And second, we wanted to set the product name from the CSV file to the English name of the product class. So there's this field, name en, product name, and we're done. Then what else? Then we come to the relations. We want to assign the manufacturer which we created before, those two, Jumpy and Lime. We want to assign those to our newly created product objects. For this, at first, we assigned that we want to use the data from the manufacturer raw data column. Of course, this is only a string. You see that in the example result column, preview column here. And the string obviously cannot be set to a many-to-one relation. So we have to we have to tell the import bundle to convert this string to an object or to find an object depending on this string. And this can be done via the settings. As before, for the published field, we have those templates. In this case, there is the option, there's only one option. This is the assign core shop manufacturer object by name. This is caused because the core shop manufacturer class has a unique field, a unique index on this field name. And for this reason, only for this field you get the callback function template provided here. And when we wouldn't have any unique indexes, you would only be able to assign a product another object by its path. In this case, there is a unique index on the core shop manufacturer because it wouldn't make any sense that you have multiple manufacturers with the same name. And for this case, we have a unique index. I'll come to that in a minute. Let's look at the core shop manufacturer class again. The name got a unique index here, so that's why we get the proposal to use that for the relation, to find the relation object. When we analyze the generated the generated callback function on the bottom here, we see that this is a string, and I'd like to explain the structure of this string. We call this a data query selector, and this works the following. There are 3 parts in this string, separated by colon signs. And the first part is the class which we want to find an object of. In this case, of course, we want to find a core shop manufacturer object, so we put that here before the first colon. After the first colon, this is the field which we want to query on. In this case, we want to query a core shop manufacturer object whose name is, and then the third parameter after the second colon, which is params value. Params value does refer to the set raw data field here. So params value in this case does contain the value which is in the manufacturer column for each item. You see that also when you look at the example result column, there we see the result of the callback function, which is core shop manufacturer name, and then this params value gets automatically replaced to Lime, because for the first object the manufacturer is Lime. And now obviously this only would be a string, but these data query selectors automatically get converted, and it really tries to find an object of the class core shop manufacturer with the name equal to Lime. And when we look at the parsed column, then we'll see that it actually will find an object whose path is manufacturer's Lime, and that's exactly the one which we wanted to get. So under the manufacturer's folder there's a Lime, and that's the full path of this object. So to achieve that, we didn't need to program anything, because everything got just provided by this template. The same goes for categories. When we look at the product class again, then we see that categories relate to core shop category objects. And when we look at the core shop category class, then I set a unique index on the name field. In other use cases, you wouldn't set an index on this field, perhaps because the category structure can be that on different levels the categories with the same name may exist. But for our example, it would be, or it is easier that we have a unique index. Otherwise, we could, of course, use the find the object by path, but let's stay with that for now, with the unique index on the name. When we find the categories field, we see that it's a many-to-many relation, and again, we want to use data from the main category column in the CSV file. And of course, again, we have this tracking bytes as a string, and the string cannot be set as a many-to-many relation. And for this reason, we also have to define how to get from the string to the actual object. As we set this unique index, the template again provides us with this assigned core shop category object by the English name. And in this case, the function is a bit longer, more complex. At the end, it is the same. We have for all items which we have in the raw data field, we just add the data query selector to an array and return that array. When we save that, we see again that this object gets found. We get a Pimcore model data object core shop category object with the path products trading bikes. And that's this one here. Yes. When we look back to the example, we want to set the name of the product as key. So let's also set that. And then I think we are done. Let's test that with one raw data item and go through the output. Oh, we have forgotten the key column. As key column, we can use the SKU because there shouldn't be two products with the same SKU. Let's see if that already created an object. No, it doesn't. It did, but on this level, right? Okay. Now we have set the SKU as the key column, and now execute the import again. Let's go through line by line. We import raw data item 17, and the set key field is SKU. So now it tries to find an existing object with SKU 1234. It doesn't, so it imports this object as a new object. We see here that the categories return is an array with one item, which is the data query selector for the already existing category. And for manufacturers, that's the same. There's this data query selector returned core shop manufacturer lime, and that's it. Now we see that the full path of the imported object will be rental bike. When we refresh our settings, then we see that it is imported on this level. That's because we have forgotten to tell the import bundle that it should get under the category. For this task, we have to set up the path field. In the path field, we have two options. Either we, not the manufacturer, but the main category. Either we can set a string, this will get interpreted as a folder if it doesn't exist, or so to say as a full path, can also be an object. Or we can use those data query selectors. In this case, sadly, there's no already prepared template, and so we have to create this data query selectors ourselves. We want to find a core shop category with the field which has in the English name the value which we just assigned as the raw data field to be used. So we assign main category, and this will get to parent's value. To other parameters, or those callback functions also have other parameters. We'll come back to that in another session. When we save that, then we see in the preview the result from the callback function is here as expected, and that gets parsed to an existing object, products tracking bikes, and that's this one. So when we import this object again, we'll see that the object now gets successfully saved to the folder to the path products tracking bikes rental bike, and that's what we actually wanted to achieve. So in the root folder there is no rental bike object anymore. It got moved to the tracking bikes category, and this way we can achieve an object hierarchy. Yes. Now let's come back to these images, because when we open the rental bike object, we will see that the name got set as we wanted, the SKU got set, the manufacturer and also the category got set, but the images haven't been set yet. And that's because we haven't mapped them. On this images field, we will again set that we want to use the main image, and we see it in the example result column for the first raw data item. The main image is only the file name, Lime, Bike, Arlington, and so on. So we see that here, but on the parsed setting, we see that nothing is done because a string cannot be added to a many-to-many relation as before. For this reason, we have to add a template. For many-to-many relations with asset being allowed, we have two options. We can assign an existing Pimcore asset image, or we can fetch an image from a file or URL, which means this wouldn't exist yet in Pimcore, but it would get imported to Pimcore, and afterwards, of course, would be added to the assets. But as we already have those assets, we select the first option here, assign existing image. The generated callback function just takes the values from the raw data field and adds those data query selectors like described here. Again, we have the same structure. We want to find an object of the type image with an object of the type image which has the set file or the set value in the field path. Now when we save that, we will see in the preview that the data query selectors on the example result column, and this got interpreted as to fetch the really existing image. So it got returned Pimcore model asset image, and the image parse is images Lime, Bike, Arlington, Massachusetts, and that's exactly our asset which we wanted to find. So when we run that import, and scroll down a bit, then we'll see at first it tries to find an image with the path Lime Bike Arlington. Of course, this doesn't exist because we only have the file name in our raw data field, and because of that, it fallbacks and prepends the set asset source path. So now it tries to find an image with the path images, Lime Bike, and so on. And this gets found. And when we go back to the data object, then we'll see under the images that the image got assigned. Again, what I meant, when we try to find an image by path, it first gets to tried to find with the path we got from the raw data field. If this doesn't work, if no asset gets found, then the asset source folder gets prepended. Right, so now we have the structure as our task wanted us to have. Again, we will import all data for the products so that we have everything in our tree. So there it is. When we refresh the products folder, we see dirt bikes, trekking bikes, and there they are. When we look exactly, then the Lime rental bike isn't called Lime rental bike on our example. This is because in our CSV file, the product name is only rental bike. But now in our project, it is wanted that the object key should consist of the manufacturer and the product name. So although those data is in our raw data, it isn't in exactly one column, but in two in this case. So in the end, we want to get the name Lime rental bike, so we have to concatenate the values of those two columns for the key field. And for that, let's go back to the products import and on the key field. We can only set one key field here, so we have to do that this concatenation via the callback function. Let's go back to that. When we select template, there are two options: prepend other field and append other field. When we select that, prepend other field, because we already have the product name and want to prepend that name, or prepend the manufacturer name to that product name, then we get this little function as a template, and here we can just edit this function and define which other field we want to prepend the value. And in our case, that's the raw data field main category. When we save that, then we see, no, we didn't want the category, we wanted the manufacturer. Then we see the result is Lime rental bike, and that's what we wanted it to get. And we now import this raw item and scroll down a bit. Then we will see here callback return for field key is Lime rental bike, and when we scroll down to the bottom, then the full part of the saved object is now products, trekking bikes, Lime rental bike. Again, the already existing object got found because we used the SKU as a key column, so it isn't any new object created, but the already existing object got renamed. There it is, Lime rental bike. Okay, so this seems to have been solved, this task. We have the object hierarchy as defined in this task, and we didn't need to program anything. Most of the things got proposed in the callback functions, so we had just to select them, and everything else was done automatically. I hope this little example was useful, and in the next sessions we will go to the more advanced topics of the data director. Thank you for listening.
If you got any further questions about mentioned features and configuration options of the Pimcore Data Director, please browse through our YouTube channel. If you do not find answers to your questions there, please feel free to contact our technical support team to hilfe@blackbit.de. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel to remain up to date, and thank you for watching.